Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're going to begin in just a moment, so if you could find your seat. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here at the City Club Friday Forum. This is our last Friday Forum before the end of the year, and it's my last chance to share with you about our City Club's annual fund. Our annual fund is an essential component of City Club's endeavor and how we keep the doors open. And I want to encourage you to think about three things about City Club and our annual. Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Portland Friday Forum. I'm John Horvick, City Club President, and I'd like to welcome members and guests alike. Those of you who join us today at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. Today, David Sarasohn will talk with university presidents of Oregon State University, Portland State University, and the University of Oregon about rebuilding higher education. But first, some announcements. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I want to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine. Our current Friday Forum sponsors are Geffen Mesher, Iberdrola Renewables, Perkins Coie, Portland General Electric, and Providence Health and Services. We are grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. Today is the last of our forums for 2013. Join us on January 10th when we welcome Dr. Jane Lubinchenko, former administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You can learn more about this and other club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, City Club will be live tweeting at today's event. You can follow or mention us at PDX City Club. Be sure to use the hashtags City Club in your own tweets. We'll be having a Q&A session with our guests at the end of today's program. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your questions. And for all our audience participants, please locate the index cards on the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum, and we'll collect them prior to the Q&A. And now to our program. President Ed Ray of Oregon State University, President Wim Wiewel of Portland State University, and President Michael Gottfredson of the University of Oregon will discuss their perspectives on the new board structure, new collaborations, and rebuilding higher education. They will shine a light on their respective schools regarding research, academics, and innovation, and workforce development under a bold reform that could allow competitiveness for funding to push higher education forward. President Ed Ray has served as Oregon State University's president since 2003. He came to Corvallis by way of Ohio State University, where he served as economics department chair, senior vice provost, and executive vice president and provost. His degrees include mathematics from Queens College, a master's in economics from Stanford University, and a PhD in economics from Stanford University. His research interests are the history of protectionism in the U.S., investment and trade barriers, and the adoption of Social Security. He has authored the book U.S. Protectionism and the World Debt Crisis. President Wim Wiewel assumed the presidency of Portland State University in 2008. He was previously provost and senior vice president of academic affairs at the University of Baltimore. He also served as dean of business administration at the University of Illinois at Chicago. President Wiewel earned degrees in sociology and urban planning at the University of Amsterdam and a PhD in sociology from Northwestern University. His most recent book is Global Universities and Urban Development. The newest of our three presidents on stage is Michael Gottfredson, who was appointed president of the University of Oregon in June 2012. Prior to appointment, President Gottfredson served as executive vice chancellor and provost and professor of criminology, law, and society at the University of California at Irvine. And previous to that, he served in several administrative positions at the University of Arizona. President Gottfredson holds a master's degree and a PhD from the State University of New York at Albany and an AB from the University of California at Davis. His research specialties include the causes of crime and delinquency and the criminal process. His work on the connection between early childhood experiences and crime is widely cited. Moderating today's event is David Sorensen, columnist and managing editor for the Oregonian. Prior to joining the Oregonian, David was a writer with the Oregon magazine and a professor of history at Reed College. Please join me in welcoming our guests to the stage.
Good afternoon. Welcome to University President-a-Palooza. We're going to move directly to questions here. We'll ask the same questions to each of the presidents, although I reserve the right to follow up dubious or questionable answers. And we're going to ask people to try to keep their answers brief. If one of the presidents is running too long, someone will come out from the NCAA and hit them with a snowball, and they'll be disqualified from a bowl game. So we hope this will be a firm instruction. So let's start out, and we'll do this at the beginning in terms of seniority. We'll mix it up in the process. But sort of the core question as we're restructuring the system and as we're reworking governance, I wonder if each of you could tell us a little bit how your restructuring is working, how it's proceeding, and how it's going to make you a stronger university. President Ray?
We're just getting started with the process, but I think an appropriate preamble is I'm the guy who said, don't do this. We're now at a place, legislation was adopted to create institutional boards. I said when the discussion started prior to the adoption of Senate Bill 242, I need two things for us to be as successful as possible in serving the needs of the people of Oregon. I need operating flexibility and I need resources. The legislation had nothing to do with resources, but it did say, if you want operating flexibility, you have to have an institutional board. And so there was no question for us, we need to have an institutional board. So far in the early going, I'm very happy with where we are. We have an extraordinary group of individuals who have agreed to serve on the board. They represent every corner of the state and beyond, a very diverse group. So I believe that all voices will be at the table that need to be there for us to have meaningful discussions. In a sense, I've acquired the sense that the board really could be kind of the keeper of the mission of the university and help us maintain kind of constancy of purpose going forward. And that's very important for any organization. And so I feel we're in a good place, and I'm very excited about the possibility going forward.
President Wiewel.
First of all, I want to thank City Club for organizing this event and putting this kind of spotlight on higher education. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for being here, even if we had to buy 3 or 4 of the tables ourselves, but it's great to have you all here. We do, you know, it's been interesting that the expectation for what this restructuring would do is in a way so high that people indeed are asking me, well, what difference is it making? Well, we had the first meeting orienting the new board the past 2 days. So you know what? They haven't worked miracles yet. The world looks remarkably the same today as it did a week ago. It is going to take some time. But I am extremely excited about having this board. I want people to know that when this first was raised about 5 years ago as a question, I was truly agnostic on the subject. I really didn't know whether this would be a good idea or not. It was only after thinking about it, looking into it in depth, that I came to the conclusion that yes, this could really work very well, not just for Portland State, but for the whole state of Oregon. That by giving us the opportunity to become a better and stronger university, we would be able to contribute more to the economy, certainly of the Portland region and the state as a whole, and that would be good for everybody. In particularly, I'm looking at this board for 2 key things. One is that you know, these are extraordinarily difficult and challenging times in the higher education world. As you know, we're going through this whole technology upheaval with open online courses, the funding challenges, the increased pressures for accountability, very much due to the fact that state support has been declining, therefore tuition has been going up, therefore student debt is rising. So understandably, people are asking much tougher questions than they did 10 or 20 years ago. To try to navigate through this challenging world and to see where are we going to be, how can we best serve the original mission of the university, it helps to have a bunch of smart people with a whole range of experiences in different parts of life to help a president and his executive team think about the future. They're not the only ones, they're not the ones determining and setting it, but they can be very helpful. The second main purpose is that, as you all know, higher education has been grossly underfunded, particularly in Oregon, being 46th or 47th in the nation, and David has written about that more times. It somehow hasn't solved the problem yet, so keep writing.
I've seen it before.
Keep writing. But having a group of advocates, and I think that's where all the boards can work together. We will now have at least 3 boards. Clearly there will continue to be a 4th board, at least for all the 4 other universities or more of them. That's a great group of advocates for higher education in the state, and I think that, again, that will be beneficial for all of higher education and for all of the state.
President Gottfredson.
Thank you very much, and I'm also delighted to be here. This is my first visit to the City Club. Thanks very much for having us, and thanks for focusing on higher education. Very important. I'm delighted to be here. Actually, I should say I'm delighted to be anywhere. In the last several days, it's been kind of hard to travel out of Eugene. So great to be here. Well, we're excited about this new reform. We think it's a bold reform. We've been working on it carefully and particularly in partnership with President Wiewel, worked through Senate Bill 270. We think it's an excellent bill. Remembering the proximate cause of this focus on institutional boards and why we came to this reform effort, and that is, as President Wiewel just said, the very, very significant financial circumstances that we find ourselves in, the decline in state funding for higher education in Oregon, nationally, but particularly in Oregon. The statistics are remarkable. We have 43% less operating budget from the state today than we did in 2008. Very significant shift in who pays the costs of higher education. Our costs actually haven't increased appreciably, inflation adjusted over that period of time. What's changed is who's paying those costs, and increasingly the students and their families are picking up the costs of higher education in Oregon. So keep doing what we're doing, or try to innovate and find a new way to refinance higher education and deal with the financial circumstances that we find ourselves in without changing our mission. And we haven't changed our mission in any way. Focus on access and excellence, access for Oregon resident students, affordability, enabling high-quality educational experiences for the citizens of the state. That's what we seek to do, and that's what we seek to do better through this new board structure. So what does it do? Well, it associates with each university that has an institutional board a group of citizens who will dedicate their efforts and their interests to furthering that great mission that we all have, furthering affordability and access to higher education in the state. Learn about and know the institution and work on flexibility, new ways of managing our institutions, and new ways of generating resources to keep fees as low as we possibly can. So there's a great deal more flexibility built into the structure of the institutional boards. For example, for the first time, universities like the U of O will be able to think about going to the public debt markets ourselves and capitalizing the assets of the institutions when it seems to be an advisable financial strategy, flexibility in operations. So we're excited about it. We're tremendously excited about the governor's appointments to all of the institutional boards and to the board at the University of Oregon. So we think, now it's, of course, it's very early. We've had a couple of meetings only. The institutional boards take over jurisdiction July 1st, 2014. So we're in the process of building bylaws and the like during this period. But we're very excited about the opportunities that the new boards have. And it's I think it's an innovation that allows us to think about new ways of doing business, not a new mission, not a new purpose for our higher educational institutions, but an opportunity to do things in a different way, try to do things in a different way, to refinance what is an increasingly important obligation of the state. There's never been a time in the history of our country where a college degree was more important than it is today. Individually, 64% higher starting salary for individuals that have a college degree versus those who have a high school diploma only, $1.2 million lifetime earning differential. Multiply that through the graduates and to the state. Both the individual and the collective benefit of higher education has never been more critical than it is today. So it's really incumbent upon us to try to do things differently, try to imagine new ways, try to create different ways to finance education so that we can provide those opportunities for outstanding educational experiences that our citizens deserve.
So we've gotten, very quickly and inevitably to the question of resources here. And each of you have had considerable experience in systems outside of Oregon before coming here. And I wonder if I could ask you to talk a little bit about Oregon's particular attitude towards higher education and funding, and both in terms of popular attitudes and the legislature. And President Gottfredson, since you've gotten here most recently, why don't you start?
Happy to do that. The disquieting trend of states disinvesting in higher education or maybe not being able to support it to the extent that was once true is a national phenomenon. It's taken place in all of the states, but it's fair to say that it has been more radical here in Oregon. I cited the statistic of 43% decline in state appropriation to the U of O since 2008. Today, our operating budget at the U of O, 5% of our operating budget is provided by the state. Students pay 8 times more than the state does for their educational experience in Oregon today. Well, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, markedly different. So when I attended the University of California a while back, actually there was no tuition. What's gone on progressively throughout the country, but more so in Oregon than other states, has been this withdrawal of public support for higher education and the shifting of the cost to the students and their families. That 43% reduction at the U of O represents about $30 million of recurring support for the university. Today we have a $46 million operating budget from the state. $30 million less is equivalent of 2 schools at the U of O. That's the magnitude of that reduction. So it's a very significant shift for us, more significant than nearly all of the other states in the United States.
President Wiewel?
Yeah, I've lived in New York, Massachusetts, Indiana, Illinois, Maryland, and now Oregon. And I don't think there's any place where the gap between the rhetoric in support of higher education and the reality is as great as it is here. It was just amazing to me how wonderfully supportive people are when you talk about higher education. And it wasn't just when I came and I was being courted to actually take this job. It has continued. And it's wonderful. And at times it feels like sort of being in a warm bath because everybody believes in higher education and says it's really, really important to the future of the state. But as you know, then the actual deeds, and I'm not speaking about individuals, it's obviously a complex situation. It's not just, oh, if the legislature only did the right thing. The legislature is responding to the realities of decisions made by the voters. So I'm not putting blame on any one particular body or group of people here, but nevertheless, there is that huge gap. Frankly, we are more and more at the stage where we say sitting around and whining isn't going to get you anywhere. So yes, we will do advocacy for more state funding. We do hope that the 2015 session will provide additional resources, and I very much look forward to collaborating with all 7 of our public universities to make that case, along with our colleagues from community colleges, to get the reinvestment in the 2015 session that there seems to be the revenue to make it possible, and it will help us. But we clearly, even if we get a, we would need a 50% increase, 50% increase in what we're getting from the state now to just make up what we lost in the last 5 years. We've lost $28 million. We now get 56. So we would need a 50% increase to just make up that amount. Well, 50% increases don't come along very often. So I'm not holding my breath on that one. So we need to find other ways. And that's why we are looking at what are the opportunities for possible looking more to this region. Obviously, part of the argument for boards was that in some cases it might open the doors to more philanthropy. In our case, that is one aspect, but it might also open the doors for more support from the region from public sources. So we cannot sit around. Then there are the partnerships with business, with other partners, because we cannot keep going back to raise tuition from the students, but we cannot sit around and whine either.
President Ray?
Well, actually, I think more optimistic than I've ever been. I think we actually have gotten a bit past rhetoric. I'm very excited about the effort to create a seamless pre-K 20 educational system in the state. I think creation of the Oregon Education Investment Board, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, which will have oversight of community colleges and universities, is spot on. These are exactly the kinds of structural changes that we need. We have a history of having degree partnership programs with every community college in the state. We need to increase, as the saying goes, the throughput and reduce the leakages from the education system if we're ever to achieve 40-40-20 by 2025 or at any time. So I'm really excited about the changes in the organizational structure that we're making. My own take on Oregon is a place of incredible vision and ideas that's always at risk of failure through underfunding. So at the same time, we see organizational changes that are very encouraging. The reality is that the student-teacher ratio in the public schools in Oregon is higher than it's ever been. More than 50% of school-age students come from low-income families, from more diverse backgrounds than ever before. The challenge is greater than it's ever been for children to be successful in school, and yet we struggle with this funding problem. I tell people I have an operating rule: no whining, but I'm perfectly willing to whine on behalf of other people. And so if I had to pinpoint a really critical issue that the state needs to step up and address, it's the core funding for the regional and technical universities in this state. I know how I can get to my part of 40-40-20, but I'm having a hard time seeing how we get there collectively. And I'll give you a quick example. Our enrollment is up. Our enrollment is up almost 1,600 students this year. We are growing faster than we would choose to grow. Do you know what the net growth of enrollment in OUS net of Oregon State University is? 14 students. Not 140, not 1,400, 14. That's how much the rest of the system has grown this year. You tell me how to get from there to 40-40-20. I think a big part of the puzzle is, at the very least, we've got to do a much better job securing sustainable funding for the regional and technical universities.
Well, since we brought up the question of 40-20, when you actually talk to people, in the legislature or at the higher levels of higher education about this, and you say, how do you possibly get to this number? You're told, well, it's aspirational. Now, is the actual realities of our funding and our resources going to keep this being permanently aspirational as a distance, President Ray?
Yeah, so let me follow up quickly. That's why I'm very excited about the structural changes. I think they make a lot of sense. We're never going to have the resources to create the throughput with the kinds of leakages and failures in the system that we have now. We really need to change the way all of education works, and I think structurally we're trying to move in that direction. But the reality is that we're 45th in the nation in support per student FTE. We're 38th in financial support to students themselves to get through all the way through pre-K 20. The way to change the calculus of it all is to be much more effective and successful at every stage of the educational system. And I think we're doing the right thing structurally. I want us to appreciate what has been accomplished. The governor deserves a lot of credit for that, and we've got great people in leadership positions for that structure. But the notion that everything can be accomplished by working harder and smarter and doing more with less is simply not realistic. We do need to move resources too.
President Gottfredson?
So I think in some ways 40-40-20 is aspirational, and I think that's a good thing. It is a, I think as the governor has referred to it, it's our North Star. Without aspirations, we don't have much. What it does tell us is, in order to reach those aspirations, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and do a lot of things in a different way. Part of that is structural, part of it is how we teach, how we educate, part of it is how we finance education. So I think there's nothing wrong with aspirations. Actually, one needs to start there. It's a good aspiration. It tells us how we're falling short. And what I would say, and kind of companion to what President Ray has said, what 40-40-20 says to us is, one of the things that we have to focus on is the pipeline, pre-K through 12. When I look at the financing of public education in the state, I see the most serious deficiencies in pre-K through 12. The universities need to roll up their sleeves and do things a little bit differently, and we all are focused on our graduation and retention rates. But the fact of the matter is, the state of Oregon needs to do a much better job of financing public pre-K through 12 in order to have the students move along the pipeline in sufficient numbers with sufficient achievements in order to attend our universities in the first instance. So I think 40-40-20, it provides a roadmap. I'm very fond of actually the OEIB structure. I think that's the right way now. It's a very creative and innovative way to think about education in the state as an investment. It is an investment. It's an investment in individual citizens. And as I mentioned, and we all know, there are very few investments as important as education to individual economic and social mobility. There's very little investment more important than the collective achievement that is the collective result of having a better educated workforce. You know, we're in a very, very competitive world. We all know that, increasingly global world. We want our citizens, we want our students to be able to compete on the world stage. Well, in order to do that, we need to achieve 40-40-20. It's a reality. So having that as an aspiration is a very, very important thing to do.
President
Funding
Goodell?
it is a critically important thing to do as well.
Yeah, I think about it as essential more than aspirational. Now, you know, whether it's really 35, 35, and 30, we'd probably all be standing up and cheering and think we did pretty well if we reached that by 2025. So it's not about the literal numbers. But for all the reasons that Mike Gottfredson just laid out, both for the individual opportunities, but from the state perspective, for the collective opportunity of being a state that is competitive. We all know how the average income in Oregon, which used to be above the national median, has been declining to below it. If we do not want to become sort of an economic colony where, you know, we produce the work for others and we have the low-wage jobs, we have to make sure that people are educated, and particularly that our own population is being educated. One of the almost catch-22s I think that Oregon is in is that because it is such a nice place to come, we've been able to attract well-educated people from elsewhere and almost kind of ignored our own population. When I came here 5 years ago, I looked at the demographic makeup of our students, and I was seeing that we were not doing a good enough job with reaching out to some of the very rapidly growing populations like the Latino population. So we put more emphasis on that, and just in the last 5 years, we've doubled the number of Latino students on campus from 1,200 to 2,400. It isn't like it went from 10 to 20 or something. That's easy. No, it was already a good-sized number, but it needed to be doubled. Because if we do not educate that population, there will not be an educated labor force from right here, and we will continue to exacerbate inequality in the state. Beyond that, I agree with the points that were made previously that we have heavily invested in working with all hands raised, the cradle-to-career effort that is located here in Multnomah County to fix that educational pipeline, because, again, universities cannot fix it by themselves. We have to make sure that the whole educational system works and gets people ready for an education. And finally, again, I don't sit around waiting for that state truck with money to come to campus. Yes, we will fight to get it, but we are doing what we can to make sure that we deliver a quality education as efficiently and effectively as possible. We've started a big project called Rethink PSU, which is focused on how do we take advantage of the new technologies to build a pedagogy, to develop a way of teaching that still takes advantage of students being right here, of our strong connections with the community, of our emphasis on applied learning through internships and capstones and all that, but at the same time builds in the new technologies to find ways to deliver education more efficiently. Because if we just sit around and saying it's got to be the way it's always been and just give us the money to do it, we will not succeed.
I wonder if I could follow up for just a moment on PSU's particular situation. So we just went through this legislative session where we said things had stabilized, and there was, as usual in Oregon, a fair amount of self-congratulation about readjusting things, and yet PSU got to a point where it's had to cut $15 million. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the pressures involved in that and what kind of adaptations are required there.
Sure, yeah, we're rebalancing the budget for next year by about $15 million, and that comes about from having lost $28 million in state funding over the last 5 years. That's a combination of the cut in funding and increased premiums, PEP and PERS. We now pay to the state as much in PEP and PERS premiums as the state gives us in support. It's sort of an equal swap, I guess, but it doesn't give us much else. In addition to that, we did increase salaries over the last 5 years. We increased tuition, but not nearly enough to cover those costs. So that left us with a $15 million shortfall. We're addressing that both by looking at increased revenues. We're definitely looking at increasing revenues, as well as by rebalancing. We've already made a number of decisions about people not getting increases. All of the people who are not in unions are getting either no increases or very small increases. We have told the football program that it has to become self-supporting, and we're looking at a wide range of other efficiencies. So far, we've been able to protect the academic units. In the end, there will be some changes there as well, but we're of course trying to safeguard the actual activities that go on in the classroom and the labs.
One of the things that's come up with the emergence of the individual boards and sort of the withering of the coordinating structure is the concern of the atomizing of the situation and the separation of each of the universities. So I wonder if I could ask you to talk a little bit about how the universities work together. I mean, not only among the three here, but on the regionals, as President Ray brought up about how this can still function as a strong and productive unit. President Gottfredson?
Sure, happy to do that. One of the delightful things that I found in arriving here a little over a year ago is really the great collaborative nature among the presidents and the universities in the system. It's remarkable. So we're all concerned in this environment. It's true, I think we all believe, we know, for any of us to be successful, we all have to be successful. We all have basically the same underlying mission: provide a great educational experience to the residents of Oregon at a affordable cost, and we try to differentiate our programs and our missions in order to cover the portfolio of educational experiences that should be offered. I think we do that very, very well. To my mind, we do that very well in Oregon. Well, we're trying to innovate, and one of the things that we've been working on over the last several months is a new way to do shared services, and we have collaborated together, the 7 presidents, in creating a new shared services idea organization that we're putting forward. A completely different model. We're trying to think outside the box. How do we do those back office activities, be more efficient, more effective in a collaborative way to take advantage of economies of scale, to take advantage of the market in an innovative way. So we have a proposal, an idea, to create a shared services organization in which the 7 presidents are basically the board of directors of this organization. And we leverage off the strengths of the existing universities now to host the shared services facilities and have a organization that works on behalf of the universities to provide flexible and innovative shared services. So we've worked collectively together to put forward this proposal, and President Ray can speak to this very effectively. He's co-chaired the committee with President Davies. So one idea. I think fundamentally, though, what's true and has been that I found to be a great asset in arriving in Oregon is really the willingness to work together among the schools, and also the dedication to our common purpose. So we haven't changed the idea of what we're supposed to do. We're struggling with the circumstance, a problematic recession that's crippling and has been prolonged for so long. Very difficult economic circumstance. Lots of calls on the state budget, including higher education. And I agree, the appreciation for the value of higher education in Oregon is great. There's an incapacity to deal with it in terms of financial structure, but the willingness of the schools to work together in collaboration, our articulation agreements are terrific. So I think there's really been I found a very great spirit of collegiality among the universities.
President Wiewel?
Yeah, people sort of get, carried away by the rivalry that's primarily based on the rivalry between the athletic teams, and we don't really care about that very much. We'd love to care, but But in reality, there is an amazing amount of collaboration on the substance of what we actually do. First of all, just ways in which courses are integrated between both all of the universities and the community colleges, which facilitates transfer. So that for students, it can actually be fairly, I don't want to quite say seamless, but certainly quite easy. As importantly, the amount of faculty research that is being done jointly around the nanotechnology, around transportation, around translational drug research, the collective proposal that we just had this past year for increasing essentially the high-speed backbone for information exchange. And I think that has a lot of future opportunities, collaboration around the metals industry. So there are a lot of collaborative ventures that aren't as much fun and sexy to write about as which quarterback had a better Sunday, but it ultimately is much more important for the future economy of the state. And I think that in a way, and I've seen it in previous institutions where I've been, sometimes people collaborate better and get along better if they don't actually have to, if they're not in a structure that tells them you shall collaborate, but when people do it voluntarily in the places where it makes sense to them. And I see some of that beginning to happen, that people are choosing, this is where we can really get together. And instead of sort of being annoyed about the ways that you have to do things that maybe you don't want to do. So I see this only improving, and especially once we're past the current ambiguity. There's obviously, we're just starting, there's still ambiguity about the governance structure for our 4 colleagues, so that all creates uncertainty. But once we get past that, I think we will see actually a blooming of more collaborations.
President Ray?
Yeah, I think the oversight of all of higher education by the Higher Education Coordinating Commission will be helpful in assuring that we stay aligned and work together. But as Mike said, there's a long history here of collaboration. It was a chemist at the University of Oregon and an engineer at Oregon State University who figured out they could work together, and that led to the Oregon Nanosciences and Microtechnology Institute. All of us are involved in statewide efforts like ONAMI, like OTRADI, the Oregon Translational Research and Drug Discovery Institute, or BEST, the Built Environment and Sustainable Technologies, where we're going to be on the South Waterfront with our colleagues from PSU and OHSU. the last 2 years of clinical studies of our pharmacy students occurs in collaboration with OHSU. We did just complete, ahead of our homework deadline, for the Special Legislative Committee a report on how we think we can manage shared services go forward. Trust me, getting 7 presidents to sign anything is a monumental task, but we actually did it, and I think we all feel pretty good about where we are. So I think the President's Council that took on that task, Bob Davies and I co-chaired the committee organizing it, but I think there's a lot of promise in the President's Council going forward to ensure that we do stay focused on the objective I honestly believe we really all do have, and that is making sure we do everything we can individually and collectively to meet the educational attainment needs of the people of Oregon and to ensure that on a competitive basis, the Oregon economy is among the best in the nation, and that requires all hands on deck. We get that. I think we're working well together.
If I could follow up just a moment on that. You mentioned the particular difficulties of the regionals, and a couple of them, Southern and Eastern, seem to be in particular troubles at the moment. Something that has been suggested might be a closer alliance between some of them and Oregon State, which already has the connection to Cascades. I mean, did you see that as a possible direction?
Well, as you may know, the OUS board has asked each of the regional and technical universities to explore 3 different models: having their own individual boards, some kind of an affiliation with one or more of the universities, and a multi-university system that could be some subset of the current 7. I've been very clear with my colleagues from the regional and technical universities. I've told them that first and foremost, whatever form of governance they choose to pursue, I will always be out front speaking on behalf of them to get the resources they need to be sustainable in the long run. I need each of them to be as successful as possible for each of us to be as successful as possible. I've told them to the extent that they want to have individual institutional boards, I get it. That's really for them and their communities and supporters to determine. If there's any kind of connection or collaboration that they want to have with Oregon State University, I am there for the conversation, because effectively my commitment is to do whatever we can. We were created to be the people's university with the land-grant charter. Our job is to serve the people of Oregon, and that includes helping the other Oregon universities be as successful as possible. So I'm ready to be part of whatever conversation. I got no dog in this fight. I got no end game I'm trying to play. I am just trying to figure out how can we be helpful, and during my short time as a steward of one of these terrific universities, help us all get to the best place possible over this period of transition.
Thank you. We're coming up on 1 o'clock, so we're going to open the questioning out to the floor. We've got a microphone out there for City Club members to ask questions. We also have index cards at the tables for non-club members to write down their questions and hold them up, and someone will collect them. And I think before we do that, we've got a little bit of business to transact here with the selection of a honorary City Club membership, and we have prevailed upon the President of Portland State to draw from our list of candidates.
All right, I will draw a name, and it is Shema Taha. Shema Taha. All right, here's your complimentary membership to the City Club.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, Shema. And if we could move over to the microphone, please identify yourself first and try and keep your questions succinct.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. My name is Eric Knoll, and I serve as the chair of the Oregon Student Association Board of Directors, and I'm a student at Portland State. Before I ask my question, I want to highlight the table of 10 students at the front of the room who all came here to listen to our fabulous president's talk today. As chair of the Oregon Student Association, it's not only my role to represent the students at Portland State, but to represent the students at all 7 public universities and all 16 community colleges statewide. Now, we recognize that the average student debt for a 4-year degree in Oregon is over $25,000 at this point. And with the move over to institutional boards, we recognize that the legislation grants these new boards the ability to raise tuition by 5% without legislative approval. My question to all of you is that as we move into this new system, what is your strategy for holding these boards accountable, but also to ensuring that students can have an affordable education and a tuition that doesn't continue to increase the amount of student debt students have as they graduate?
President Gottfredson?
So very good question. And true for all of us, we're extremely concerned about the shifting of the burden of financing higher education from the state to the students and their families, and the difficulties that that's been causing us. So we're dedicated to keeping the fees as low as we possibly can. We have a variety of strategies to deploy at that, and I think these institutional boards are going to be helpful in guiding us through this very difficult period. One of the things that we're going to need to do, better than we have in the past, is roll up our sleeves on philanthropy and provide greater scholarship support for our students. As you probably know, we have this terrific scholarship program at the U of O, Pathway Oregon, in which we guarantee Pell-eligible students that they will not pay tuition and fees. And so programs like that need to be financed. They need to be financed increasingly through private giving, and so that's certainly going to be one of our strategies moving forward.
President Ray?
Yeah, just to pick up on what Mike said, as many of you may know, we are in our first university-wide fundraising campaign. We started with a goal of $625 million, raised it to $850 million. We're now at $975 million toward a $1 billion goal by the end of next year. We started, as part of that campaign, we started with a $100 million goal for scholarships. We're now at more than $175 million in scholarship money. We have a program, I came up with the name, that was my contribution, Bridge to Success. 2,900 Oregon undergraduates pay no tuition and fees at Oregon State University. I'm also the guy who told student leaders when this whole process started to make sure there was a cap on how much tuition could be increased at any of the universities without having to get outside approval, for example, from the HEC. We have a strong history of shared governance, not just with faculty and staff, but with students at Oregon State University, and we're going to stay that course, making sure that whatever increases in tuition we put in place over time, the students are at the table and an important part of that conversation. The other thing I will do is continue to beat on the state that they need to step up and do more. Tuition is what it is because of what the state has failed to do historically, and we need to make sure we don't take our eye off of that.
I wish you could have been there 2 days ago when we had dinner with our new governing board, and Pam Campos is the student representative on our board. And it was just amazing. I asked each of the board members to talk about both their vision for Portland State and sort of how they came to that through their personal experiences. And the absolutely underlying theme was their commitment to Portland State as a place that is accessible and affordable to a diverse student body. I mean, they weren't talking in front of a public body here to try to say what they thought would be politically correct. We were having a dinner conversation. So I have absolutely no worries about the commitment of our governing board to doing what they can to keep tuition affordable. Beyond that, everything that my colleagues have said is just as true. This is something where absolutely the students, the faculty, the staff, and hopefully all the smart thinking people who are members of the City Club are united in that it's only by getting that more support from the state, the philanthropy, as well as doing our own business smarter all the time, we can succeed.
I wonder if I could just ask each of you to speak briefly on the initiative that's going to be on the ballot next November from the State Treasurer's Office to use the state's bonding authority to set up a scholarship fund.
Anytime there's an initiative that will provide more funding for scholarships, it's fantastic. And obviously, the whole current funding model for scholarships is based on a shared responsibility model where the state would have the Oregon Opportunity Grant that would complement Pell Grants and institutional aid, and then a contribution by the student or their families themselves. The state has not adequately funded the Oregon Opportunity Grant. Treasurer Wheeler's idea of issuing bonds that would provide a permanent endowment would create a level of stability. At the same time, it's very clear that even in the most ambitious plan, that does not provide nearly enough. $1 billion worth of bonds only throws off, 40, 45, $50 million of money a year. The Oregon Opportunity Grant now is underfunded by far more than that. So it's a good step, but nobody should be lulled into thinking that that somehow or other solves the problem.
President Ray?
Yeah, my understanding is the initiative is to alter the Constitution so that the state can use bonding for Oregon Opportunity Grant monies put into an endowment fund. And the idea is over time to create a very strong capability of providing more opportunity grant funding. And I think that's certainly we ought to have every tool possible available to us. But as I said earlier, we're 45th in support per student FTE to the institutions, 38th in support to current students through Oregon Opportunity Grants. So the challenge in 15, 17, and beyond is finding the right balance between supporting students who are here now, supporting institutions that are trying to meet those students' aspirations, and putting money in reserve to help students in the future. One of the observations that I think gets lost is I think it's wonderful to do what we can through Oregon Opportunity Grants. But you know what? It's like a gold ticket to the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. When you get there, there's got to be chocolate. And there isn't going to be chocolate if there isn't the wherewithal to hire the faculty, the staff, to sustain the facilities, the equipment, the other things that these students deserve to expect for the education that they're having to pay a pretty big share of.
President Gottfredson.
So I think Treasurer Wheeler deserves a lot of credit for innovative and out-of-the-box thinking. It's the kind of thinking that we need to have. Some of the details need to be more fleshed out, but I think it's as a plank in the platform of providing accessible access to higher education. It's a very interesting strategy. It kind of reminds me in some ways of the initial land grant idea. It's taking a state asset and investing it with the purpose of providing access for higher education. In this case, it's debt capacity and instead of land, but it's a very interesting idea, it seems to me.
Thank you. Next question.
Wim Wiewel, City Club member. Thank you. I have connections with all of you. I graduated from OSU. I went to graduate school at OSU and PSU, and I currently help teach a human trafficking class at U of O. So I wanted to ask, with the leakage in funding that we're talking about, people don't realize, I don't think, with things like the Oregon Cultural Trust, when you give money to a cultural organization, that same exact amount of money comes out of taxes, which goes to higher education. And I don't want to put you in an awkward position, but do you have any kind of feeling how much of your loss in funds is from leakage versus a drop in the economy?
I think those things really do not add up to very much. The biggest challenge to the state budget has been what happened in the early 90s with Proposition 5, the subsequent referenda around mandatory sentencing, obviously the requirement of the state to be the primary provider for K through 12 education. I think that's where the challenges are, and that's why I think I'm a strong supporter of the governor's current efforts to rethink how the state's revenue picture can be improved, whatever the precise model may be that he and all the people he's talking with may come up with in 2015. I think that's absolutely going to be essential for us to be successful.
Can I just chime in? This is why I'll never get elected anything above dog catcher. I find it incomprehensible that it's a political third rail to live on one side of a river and talk about personal income taxes, and live on the other side of the river and talk about sales taxes. I think somehow we all have to get to a better place, and I wouldn't pretend to know the answers, but I hope there's a serious debate going forward about what does the tax structure look like, what are some sensible changes that ought to be made in it, and here's why I'll never get elected to anything. The kicker is the stupidest damn thing I've ever heard of.
Well, so actually you got one vote. I mean, you got mine. Yeah, I think this is the correct appreciation very much. And I'll just add my own 2 cents worth. The increased expenditures over the last period, 15 years, on corrections has had a very significant depressing effect on the ability of the states to afford public education. And that's very disappointing. And I could speak to that from the point of view of criminology and would like to do that at some point. But
Okay, I think we can do one more question. Who we got?
Muriel Lezak, City Club member. I think it's very exciting. For me, it's exciting to hear about your collaborations. But I want to talk about ask you about another kind of excitement that goes on. Football players are especially vulnerable to receiving concussions and other bodily injuries, which affect their ability to use higher education, to benefit from higher education, and have profound effects on their future life. I would be interested to know to what extent your institutions are dependent upon income from this kind of public entertainment, what proportion of your resources come from football, to what extent should you continue this practice of sending young men out to get injured? Thank you.
Well, why don't we do this in order of season record? President Gottfredson.
it's just tough to be on top. But so it's a very important and serious question, and I appreciate it very much. And I'd say on the injury issue, we're all very concerned about that. As a matter of fact, the Pac-12 presidents who meet together routinely and have had lots of conversations about this matter. We have there have been recent rule changes associated with attempts to mitigate the danger of some of the plays in football, and we have recently invested some television revenue in research on sports-related injuries in the Pac-12. So it's a matter that is taken very, very seriously. With respect to athletics and budgets, the athletic program at the U of O is largely a self-sustaining program, which is a great thing. It actually anchors one end of the distribution of financing among Division I schools, and so there's not a major subsidy at the U of O to athletic programs.
Yeah, I would just echo what Mike has said. In the Pac-12, we've actually set aside money, and there'll be a call for proposals among our membership to do research on concussions and other injuries that all student athletes are subject to. The NCAA also is stepping up and doing more with respect to dealing with student well-being with respect to health and safety. Our athletics program is not quite self-sustaining. It's working its way there, but basically it allows 500 men and women student athletes, 20% of which have anything to do with football, to have an extraordinary experience. It creates entertainment opportunities, obviously, for student, staff, faculty, friends of the university. It's part of the university experience. The rest of the entirety of the enterprise is certainly not dependent on football or even athletics, but it's an important part of what the college experience is about.
President Wiewel.
Neither in my home country of the Netherlands nor in my first two institutions, Illinois Chicago, University of Baltimore, was athletics a factor at all. Honestly, I think the American athletic system is crazy. If I could reinvent it, it sure as heck wouldn't be the way it is now, but it is part of life, so we're trying to figure it out. The issues that you raised, the health issues, are very serious, and I think over time will significantly change how any university approaches football, and I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our three presidents. Wim Wiewel of Portland State, Ed Ray of Oregon State, Michael Gottfredson of the University of Oregon. Thank you very much.
We are adjourned.